Gardening Program. I'm Jerry Horner, and joining me today is my best friend, is Beth Kastl. She's a fellow member of the Bella Vista Garden Club and a fellow Benton County Master Gardener. And today we're going to be talking and showing pictures of a trip that we made in 2020. 2018.
Yeah.
19 we didn't go. Anyway, we went to England, and we're going to share the pictures of those gardens we saw there. And also we'll cover upcoming event and what to do in your garden for January. So the upcoming event that I have is the Master Naturalist will be accepting applications for their training. And you get more information at nwamn.org. So anyway, we did take a trip to England, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful trip. Janet Carson, the Master Gardener head of Arkansas at the time, she got the trip together, and we went in May, and the weather was wonderful.
The weather was wonderful,
Oh,
not
gosh.
like it is today here in Bella Vista.
No.
And we were so lucky. We had so many days of sunshine without
gosh.
rain, and for London and that area, that is
It was
exceptional.
exceptional. It was.
I think we had one day of rain.
And we packed all these raincoats and umbrellas and all that. So anyway, but it's January here, and I think you'll enjoy seeing some of these beautiful gardens that we saw. And we really went originally to see the Chelsea Flower Show. I've been wanting to do that for 50 years. And we finally got to see the Chelsea Flower Show and Windsor Castle and 11 gardens in 10 days. We did this all in 10 days. So, but we had great time. So, but we wanted to share some of the pictures with you of the gardens. And the first garden we went to is Wisley Garden. It's one of the 4 Royal Horticultural Society Gardens. Everything is high society there. So, and the
Royal Gardens are special, and it's kind of like you have to be a member of them. And a lot of royalty of those were in those gardens, that lived in the palaces where the gardens are. So that's how they got their status.
We've got some pictures of the actual gardens. And this was a tunnel. This was just gorgeous with the alliums. You know, there were so many alliums over there, and I started putting them in my garden now. The alliums were just gorgeous. And then they had, everything was blooming at the same time. We had rhododendrons, we had azaleas, we had tulips, we had anything you can imagine was blooming all at the same time, not like here when things bloom and then, you know, they're over with. So, and they had they're maintaining the gardens all the time.
Right.
Yeah,
they work on their knees.
Mm-hmm.
Like this picture, you see that this, and they have, of course, 4 or 5 master gardener type people that stay in each garden all the time. It's their full-time job, so that's the reason they're so beautiful.
And this is the, this garden has one of the largest collections of plants in the world. They're just unbelievable. So the next one was Ham House Garden, and it's a National Trust garden. Now the National Trust garden has a little more rules they have to follow, and you have to be, you know, invited to be a part of the National Garden Trust. There's 180 of them in Europe, and there's a sign that says about their garden project. So they are constantly working on these gardens all the time to improve them. So there's formal gardens that you expect to see. You know, what you see.
That's
those
very English, the formal
English,
gardens.
Yes, and then they had fantastic plantings. That was their vegetable garden. They had a big vegetable garden.
At the back of that ham estate, They have a little restaurant, and they had where they grew all their vegetables and everything that they provided for lunches and stuff.
Yeah,
It was
it was
amazing.
And every one of these places were just, you could spend a whole day there, but we didn't have a whole day. But there's, the formal gardens in England are very formal. And then this is a golden chain tree. It's native to Europe, and we saw that everywhere. It was just gorgeous, that chain tree. So, and then the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew.
I think this was the largest of all the gardens.
I think so. It's
very well known. It's a lot of tourists go there.
It was established in 1759, if you can imagine. Has over 50,000 species of plants covering 300 acres.
And of course,
So-
we didn't walk all those acres.
No, we couldn't. So, but the alliums were gorgeous. You can see the layout of the garden. It was just immense. So we get to see a small part of it, and then they had a wonderful display of the alliums. They were just gorgeous, and the greenhouse, and then.
And all of our tours that we took, we had the master gardener of each of the
Yes,
areas
right.
to guide us and to tell us all about it. And
Right.
so we had
And
really excellent.
What you did see there for a minute was the Chihuly exhibit.
Yeah.
That exhibit was from 2016.
And
It
that was the
Chihuly
paintbrush.
glass.
What was that, paintbrush?
The paintbrush.
Yeah.
It's called paintbrush, yeah. And then they also had diagrams of some of the beds. You walk down a pathway, and they had these semicircle plantings, and then they told you what was in there.
Yeah.
It was just wonderful.
It
You
was
could-
like a map to their garden.
Right, it was
You could
just-
look and see, and they would identify the plant,
Right.
and then you could look and see what the plant really looked like. It was really
Yeah. But
a lot of effort.
That's one of the walkways then, so you see it interpreted in plants, and they were just beautiful. Everyone was different, so that was great. And just a lot of formal gardens there too. Then we have, that's that golden chain tree that they have over archways. It was like forsythia almost. It was just beautiful. And then Cliveden Gardens. It's a National Trust garden, and it's an English country house with 376 acres. It was the former home of the Astor family, and it stands in a wooded plateau, beautiful fountains, and I think this one has 5 formal gardens and many more acres to explore. We took a tram around this because you can't possibly see it all. So we took a tram and it stopped at different locations. But they also had the boxwood or ivy trained on the building. That was really interesting to see too. And then the head gardener told us all about how they planted their annuals, and they really replant annuals every year. But most of the plants look like they were on steroids because they were so
yeah,
beautiful.
we thought they were probably fertilizing every day
Yeah,
or
they
something.
must be.
This is a chestnut tree.
Well, it's called
horse
horse chestnut tree.
yeah.
It's similar to our horse chestnut trees. And we saw those everywhere, and they were just beautiful, beautiful test. So
Louder.
that's the close-up of the chestnut tree bloom. And you can see, like I said, it looked like the plants were on steroids because they were just huge. So, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful garden. Then the next one we have is Waddesdon Manor. It is also a National Trust garden. So I think that's still the other garden, Cliveden. Yeah, Waddesdon Manor. And it's where they were the vision of Baron Ferdinand Rothschild.
Rothschild.
So,
And they're the ones that did the wine.
yes.
They had, they even had it where we bought some of their wine and brought
Right.
it back. That was one of the only things that we could bring back.
Yeah.
They wouldn't let us buy any of the plants that they had in their gardens because you can't bring them back into the United States. So we just
we're
had to.
sorry we couldn't buy plants.
We settled for wine.
And then we toured the home there at the manor. And while we were touring the home, we had a terrible rainstorm. And when we came out, the rain was over. So, and then they have an aviary there with very unusual birds from all over the world. Their aviary, and some of the birds were just so unusual. This was a pink something, but the birds were just really interesting. And they have a lot of ribbon beds, what they called ribbon beds, that would just follow like a flowing river.
There's the wine.
And there's the wine we bought. Brought it home with us. Okay. And then Kifsgate. This is our favorite garden. This was the most beautiful garden I think I've ever seen. And it's 3 generations of women have tended this garden,
yeah.
starting in 1920s with Heather Muir. And I bought this book for Beth and I, one each, that shows the garden. And I wish I would have read this before we went, and I would have, been able to find some of these things in here. So this was an absolute gorgeous garden.
And it was not manicured like a lot of them, but it had some really neat areas where you could sit and enjoy your garden. And it was just really pleasant to be around it.
Yeah.
It wasn't so formal.
But you never saw a weed or anything out of place, but it was a more casual, it wasn't more the formal gardens. And it's in the Cotswolds, and the Cotswolds were just such a unique part of England that it was just very quaint, the whole area.
In the
Very quaint.
background, when you're in the garden, you could hear the sheep in the pastures
Yes,
below, and
right.
it was just really just like out of the movies.
Well, they have some pictures here. Oh, I went back. See, they're just free-flowing gardens, and her colors, the colors, it was like a painting, the way she picked out the colors and the textures of the leaves, and it was just amazing how Heather started this garden, and then it was taken over by her daughter, and then it was Diane Binney, and now it's by Ann Chambers. Ann Chambers and her husband now have the garden, and they have the 2 of them work along with a head gardener and one other person. There's like 4 people that tend this garden, and it was just huge. So it was just wonderful. So I want to go back and see it again. It was gorgeous. And then after Kifsgate, we went to the Three Ways House Hotel.
Yeah, we moved from the Cotswolds, from London into the Cotswolds, and this was one of the places that we stayed, and it was really old.
They were all the places we stayed were old, except London, I guess. That was old, but it was redone. Anyway, we went to the Pudding Club there, and it meets every week, and they meet in New York, Dublin, Tokyo, Osaka, and London. And then we had to eat all these puddings that they boil or bake or steam.
It's a long process to get
for
there.
Hours and hours.
Yeah.
So we had to test them all.
We
and
had
vote
to test them all and then vote which one we liked the
one we liked
best.
the best.
And at the end, we were all sick almost because
Yeah.
it was very rich.
Right. So then, as you go through the countryside, you could see these sheep everywhere. They were just beautiful. Everything was so serene and just quiet. And the clouds were gorgeous. So it was a beautiful, beautiful trip. And the next one is Burton House. Now, this was built in 1598, and it's surrounded by award-winning garden. A lot of topiaries, including a knot garden. And it was more of a natural kind of garden in the back. It was more, I'd say this had more of the native plants
Probably, yeah.
'Cause,
And when she says knot garden, that means that there are clusters that they, the way they build their garden, it has like clusters.
Yeah.
It's pretty formal.
Yeah.
We had our guide through that was on the bus with us through all of these gardens was very English lady. It took us a day or so just to be able to understand her.
Right.
And when we were on the bus between the gardens, she would give us history. We probably know more about the English royalty than anybody you know right
We
now.
heard all the stories.
All
yeah.
the stories about the English royalty.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good.
But it was, this was a more loosely, filled garden. That's kind of a knot garden there.
Yeah, that's
So that was what they had there. Okay, then we went to Barnsley. And this is a garden. It was created and by Rosemary Very. And they were a classic example of English. Now, in the back there, part of that is a restaurant. So a lot of these gardens have restaurants for money making so they can keep these gardens up. And a lot of them sell plants out of their garden. So that's how they also keep their plants, their gardens going. And it was a very, very English garden. And then they had statuary and specimen trees. They had quite a few specimen trees that would just stand out. They were just beautiful. I think that was a dogwood, a farm of a dogwood. But anyway, and then that was their vegetable garden. They had a big vegetable garden, and they use a lot of twigs for support.
Natural supports. And of course in England, in that climate, it just things, you feel like you could put a stick in the ground and it would bloom. But it's just really...
And they use mainly compost as their
Compost.
ground cover. I didn't see very much mulch of any kind, just compost. So, and then Sissinghurst Castle Garden, that was the next one. And Sissinghurst is a National Trust garden, and it had many uses from 1700s to 1930 when it opened to the public. And it has vast lawns and borders that are just beautiful, just breathtaking borders. Just like room after room, they had little rooms that you went through. And they had a white garden in there that was just beautiful. Everything was white, and it was just outstanding.
Jerry's has a white garden in her
Yeah,
yard.
I do. I have a white garden. But like I said, we saw so many things blooming at the same time. We saw iris, we saw peonies. And, for us, we have a season where the iris bloom and then something goes away, and they have it blooming all the time. So, and a lot of wisteria. There was wisteria that was everywhere, and some of these plants are, 100 or 150 years old, some of these wisterias. They were just gorgeous. And there's the white garden, and just white roses, and any kind of white flower you could think of was in there. It was beautiful. And then they had some herb gardens along with it. And tulips were blooming. Tulips, along with the iris and the peonies. A lot of the peonies were blooming. Some weren't, but a lot of them were. So it was just an amazing time of the year to go. I'm glad we went in May. And then Penthurst Place was the next one. It was built in 1341.
Wow.
And we can't even imagine.
I can't.
Going back that far here in this country. So it's got acres and acres with one bed, especially that was just absolutely breathtaking. It was a bed of peonies. These are 1,500 peonies, just about ready to bloom. And I'm sure when they were in bloom, that
I
would
bet
have
the
just
whole
been,
place was just solid pink.
just
Yeah, it was just
unbelievable. All the same peony, all the way down. And the borders were always so well kept. And the little tour guide that we had there, she was just such a sweet little thing, and she just told us about almost every plant that we walked by with, the history of it and all. So, but a lot of trimmed hedges and just a lot of maintenance on that garden with all the trimming, getting the hedges trimmed all the time. So, And then we had, that was the formal gardens right outside the palace. And
Huge estates,
Yeah,
huge
huge.
estates with, that very wealthy Englishmen.
Well, they had to be to maintain these.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of maintenance, and then they had all the servants they had to have, and so forth. And so this border there changed a lot too. Then we had Hever Castle, and this is the oldest part of the castle, dates back to 1270, and it has changed hands many times. And it was in the 16th century, is home to Anne Boleyn, Queen of England for 1,000 days.
If you
And,
remember, Henry VIII was her husband that had her beheaded.
Yes.
Yeah, wasn't a very nice man.
And then in 1903, it was acquired and restored by the American millionaire William Randolph Astor, who used it as his residence. And this was just an outstanding, outstanding garden too.
And
It had color everywhere. It was just beautiful. 38, and then they had a 38-acre lake. It was the brainchild of Astor.
Yeah, if you remember, Astor was an American that went to England and was very wealthy and took on some of those big estates and bought them. And in this one, it had all kinds of statuary
Right.
that he, at one time, went to Pompeii. Before they started really taking care of their
Treasures, yeah.
treasures and everything, and he bought, and they sold him lots of these statues that were out of Pompeii. Now you couldn't do that, but it was amazing.
But that lake they created, it was excavated by 800 men who were contracted in
Hand dug.
December 1904. And they worked day and night, and they hand dug that 38-acre lake. And then all that the soil they brought up and made the gardens. So they were just magnificent gardens, and that lake was just unbelievable. And they completed that work in 2 years, that lake. But they just worked day and night to dig that lake out. And
He
then,
wanted people to be able to ride their boats up to the
Right,
estate.
right.
And
And he even built some little cottages behind the manor, behind the castle, where his guests could stay. It was like a little city back there. So, but the Grecian works and the European statues.
yeah, this is some of the statues from Pompeii.
Yeah. And then the maintenance on the garden was extensive maintenance on this garden. This was the rose garden,
garden,
but
yeah,
it wasn't
it was a
in
rose
full
garden.
bloom. I think it was kind of between blooms at the time. There was some.
There was some places that had roses blooming, but at this place, it must be different breed.
They may have
brand or-
deadheaded, a couple weeks earlier and it hadn't filled out yet. So, but it was a beautiful, beautiful garden. It's everywhere you looked. And then they had a boulder garden. They had a lot of big rocks and up the hillside. It was just gorgeous. And every turn that she made had another beautiful scene.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, it was just
Theme
amazing.
gardens,
Yeah.
so it would be the roses or the peonies or the, so,
And I was surprised at how many gardens had the same plants that I do.
yeah.
It was surprising. Then the last day, we had an authentic English tea there, and it was just very English. And all of our crumpets and
Sandwiches.
tea and little sandwiches, and it was the end of the garden tours. And then we had to get back on the bus and make our way home. That was the bus. So, but it was, like I said, it was a fantastic trip, and I can't even say how beautiful it was, So, if you ever get a chance to go to England, make sure you have enough time to see all these beautiful gardens.
Thank God it was
So,
pre-pandemic.
yeah. Well, the gardens have been totally closed this year. Nothing's open, and we were just so fortunate to have gone when we did, and the weather we had. And I know Janet Carson does trips. She does, she's retired now, but she does gardening trips in different places around the world. So, and we might have to try another one of these days.
One of these days, yeah. This one was so, I don't know if we ever
We couldn't top it.
top it,
It
yeah.
was just a trip of a lifetime. It really was. And then what we need to talk about is what to do in your garden in January. And there's not a whole lot to do. If you get a heavy accumulation of snow like we had in December, we had 6 inches. And this is what it kind of looked like in my garden. So this was my garden shed in the snow. If you do get snow on your plants and they're starting to bend, you can take a broom and kind of get the snow off. But if it's ice, you don't want to touch the plant because it's going to break.
Break it, yeah.
So
My grasses were just all the way down, and now
then
they've popped
they
back up. But
usually. So, but don't try to take the ice out. And you don't want to use salt on your driveway if you have grass or plants by your driveway, because that'll just devastate your plants. There's other non-toxic things you can use, and like sand, things like that. So just wait for it to melt. And then if you see burn foliage on your shrubs, I mean, you can trim that out in the spring. I wouldn't trim anything now. Wait till, we might have more terrible
my
weather.
boxwoods kind of got brown on the top, so they'll be trimmed down.
You have to trim them in the spring. And if you did winter annuals, kind of dead hem them and fertilize a little bit once in a while on your winter annuals. And if you did plant trees and shrubs in the fall, you want to monitor the water to make sure that they get enough water. And then don't forget to feed the birds. You got to feed the birds because they're just such a joy in the winter to watch.
And then I have gone through like 40 pounds, at least 40 pounds a month from my bird feeders right now.
Yeah.
So they are really hungry.
Yeah. So winter's a time, just grab a hot chocolate and curl up and, maybe read a book about a garden and, get some ideas what to do in your garden and make planning for the next year. If you're looking for more garden information, the Benton County Garden.org has information from the Master Gardeners, or the Bella Vista Garden Club website is just bellavistagardenclub.com. And we usually, on our front page, on our home page, we have what to do in your garden for the month. So you can always check to see what tasks you should be doing that month and keep your garden up in shape. And the garden club's going to meet in January with the Zoom meeting again. And I don't know if the program is going to be David Rains. Is that correct?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, you did the program.
I know. It's supposed to be, but...
Supposed to be. And he'll probably do a Zoom meeting with us.
With a Zoom meeting.
About trimming trees.
We'll have to educate all of our program people how to do Zoom.
Yeah.
So it's...
And I don't know when we're going to be meeting in person again. It just depends on the situation where we're restricted, or if we all get our vaccines, maybe we can finally start meeting.
In the month of October and November, August and September and October, we met at Reardon at the Pavilion.
Yeah.
And it worked out pretty good. We didn't have, it was cold, and we didn't have as big a turnout as we normally have, but we attempted it. And we did have a program that came and weathered the cold with us, and so, but right now everything is going to be Zoom.
And we're just kind of, our lives are all on hold right now, so. But I want to thank you for joining me today and sharing this wonderful trip we had. And going down memory lane, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to do that again.
I hope so.
I hope so. And I hope you enjoyed the program and that you'll join us again next month. And until then, don't forget to stop and smell the roses.